Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about leaving Muggles. We're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons and leaving Muggles behind. Should we be leaving Muggles behind, or do we need to take extensive efforts to save them? All right. So where's this coming from? So let me cite my source here. So basically, Ben Riggs has just released a new book. I have a lot of opinions about his book, and I've shared some of them here, but I want to keep the scope on this tight. So basically, so let's talk about the scope of exactly what what is the scope of what we're talking about in this video. Here we go. All right, here's the scope. So Ben Riggs has brought out in his book that, especially in the period in the 1980s and the 1990s, Dungeons & Dragons was putting out two kinds of books. They were putting out adventure books. They were putting out Dungeons & Dragons books. And then they were putting out Dungeons & Dragons novels, okay? So you could go and you could buy the Dragonlance Dungeon Master. You could buy the Dragonlance setting book, or you could buy a large number. There's over 190. There's 190 plus Dragonlance novels. That is a lot of novels, right? So if you have that situation where you have that many novels, and then you have these distinct Dungeons and Dragons books, which ones are selling more? Well, it's not even close. Fiction outsold Dungeons and Dragons books by factors, like 10 times sometimes, right? And easily, and novels would easily outsell 2, 3, 5, up to 10 times more than any book on the actual Dungeons and Dragons let's run a campaign side, right? Rule books, adventure books, utility books, any of those type of books in the 80s and the 90s. And after 2000, after 2000, basically when Dungeons and Dragons was in the hands of Wizards of the Coast rather than TSR, novels almost disappeared completely. They've done a few, but not nearly at the accelerated print rate that they were doing them previously, right? So basically, let's talk. Why is this, right? Well, it's the Muggle issue, right? Some accountant in Michigan is going to read a Dragonlance novel and go, "Ooh, that was cool when Canterbury fought the dragon," right? You know, and he understands what's happening, right? He's like, "Oh, the Gutenberg press came out in 1500, and now we have this thing called a novel, and I turn the pages and I read it, and I'm just told the story," right? Now the reality is that's for Muggles now, right? Like if you're a dungeon master, you know this, and if you've ever played in a Dungeons and Dragons game, who's going to be happy reading a novel when you can craft this, when the story's going to be handcrafted for you, right? Like, who's happy with something that's been plopped out for thousands and thousands of readers, some generic text that's been plopped out by some author somewhere to be read by thousands of readers, right? When you can go to a dungeon master and say, let's get going, right? Here's my backstory. That's going to be interlaced into the story here, and every single thing that happens in this world is going to center around me, right? And these other three players, right? Who's going to be happy with a plopped out mega narrative when you can have a handcrafted narrative that is centered around you as the star, right? And that is just much more interactive, right? And valuable and powerful personally, right? That you can walk away with personal lessons from, right? Because there's wisdom in the Dungeon Master, there's wisdom in the Dungeons and Dragons books, there's wisdom in the settings, there's wisdom in the non-player characters that can draw out the wisdom that wasn't even known to be within what wasn't even known to be inside of the Dungeon Master. It's such a better narrative engine, right? So here we have this Muggle, right? So you got this accountant, this bog standard Michigan accountant, right? And he reads a novel and he's like, "Oh, well, I like that," right? But he's like, "Oh no, I can't act out, I can't tell you what a half elf, fighter would do when faced with a barghast, right? It's just too. I don't even know what a barghast is, right? It's too." And actually, he has the ability to know what a barghast is if an author explains it to him. But it's too much for him to decide, right? And Muggles are just overwhelmed with these decisions, and these are massively weighty decisions. Like, the moment you arrive at Dungeons & Dragons, it's like, are you good? Like, it says, hey, I want to know your alignment. Are you evil or are you good? And the person's like, what are you talking about? I haven't even asked that question about myself. You want me to ask this about some fictional character? So it really puts Muggles back against the wall. So here's the question today. What do we do, right? Do we say, hey, Dungeons & Dragons is for intelligent, charismatic, confident people? We know that's a fact now, right? But should it be? Should it be? Should we start to strip Dungeons & Dragons to be much simpler and much less complicated and give a much smoother on-ramp to bring more Muggles in? Or do we keep it, or do we ramp up the complexity, right? And go and say, Muggles be darned, man. They're just going to read novels. They're just not as important. Like, they're not, when it comes to narrative and interaction and, moving yourself forward with a tool that is not a toy, Muggles just ain't on board. And we can't do anything to bring them over, right? What's the right thing? This is incredibly difficult. I've really struggled with this. I think I'm tempted to say the answer is, do more to get Muggles in. And I think for a long time that was my take, but the reality is there's just so much momentum on the complexity side, and the fact that we've already done massive complexity on the combat side, and there's two other pillars. We need to do massive complexity on exploration and and massive complexity on the social interaction pillars. I just don't think we have so much momentum, and we're moving so fast. I don't think we can slow the train for the Muggles. I wish I had a better answer. I know that sounds elitist, but the reality is I just don't think we have time to slow the train to get the Muggles on. It's just things are moving too fast, and the people who are joining Dungeons and Dragons now, they're coming in motion, right? These are people who are connecting, like they're jumping on the train as it moves, and that's what it feels like. And you can feel it. Like, go listen to me. Like, just go to Twitter, right? And you will find on any given day, you will find 100 people going, it's my turn to Dungeon Master on Sunday, and I am wiped out mentally and emotionally, and I'm worried, and I'm, and they're really like pressed. They're very pressed, right? And because they're jumping in, they're jumping onto the train while it's moving, and it feels that way, right? So that's, I think, and I would love to say, yeah, let's do more to get the Muggles on. But the reality is, the train's moving too fast, and we're gonna be leaving even more Muggles behind as we go forward. That's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.